For this video, I went through the past 200 plus transactions that I did with buyers and sellers, but especially buyers, and then mainly focused down on the transactions that we've done in the Southwest Colorado area, from Pagosa to Mancos, all through Durango, all through this county as well. What I did is I took apart each one and looked at kind of the main struggle or the main hurdle that we had in each transaction, and I found kind of a lesson for you, found something that I could bring to you that will really help you in your journey in looking for a home in Durango in particular. So I'm not going to talk about just generic stuff that you probably already know in other markets, you know, just your general, hey, you've got to do inspections. I'm going to assume that you guys know some things about buying a home. And if you don't, of course, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to just kind of give you a base level understanding of the home buying process. But this is going to be kind of a 201 class, if you will, on this market in particular and all the struggles I've seen. So I'm going to give you a few examples here in the intro, and then we'll just dive into it. So a few things my clients have been struggling with lately is finding insurance, kind of the hurdles with insurance. And I'm going to give you some tips on when you see that property on Realtor or Zillow.com, what to look out for to know that it might be kind of a red flag property for insurance. We're going to talk about fire mitigation, fire risk. We're going to talk about irrigation rights, something that my clients have really wanted in certain properties and then realize they're not as good or they can't do as much with those rights. We're going to talk about septics. We're going to talk about wells. We recently had a transaction lately, a couple months ago, where the well needed to be, or there needed to be a new well drilled, and the quote came in at around $90,000. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, what it looks like to put in septics. We're going to talk about a lot more things particular to Durango than just those inspection items. We're going to talk about roads, longer driveways, elevation, how that elevation changes and will affect where you might want to move to. Kind of give you a brief understanding of the area, especially if this is the first video that you're watching. We're going to go over things like snow, like I mentioned, things like the airport, distance to things. We're going to talk about in-town Durango versus out-of-town Durango, where that is such a big difference here compared to a lot of other areas, and much, much more. Make sure to stick around to the last point that I'm going to be making, because that's a reason that a client just a couple weeks ago couldn't follow through and go under contract on a property. We're going to give you kind of the lessons and the hurdles to that story itself. And again, give you a lot of stories throughout this video so that hopefully illustrates some points we're going to be making, and we're jumping into it right now. Now, if you guys haven't seen my channel yet, my name's Jon Burden, and I absolutely love this area. I love Durango, Southwest Colorado. I love the mountain biking, fly fishing. I'm a distance runner as well, love hiking. My wife loves hiking. We've got 2 kids, ages 3 and 1. Absolutely love living in this area, and so I really love bringing you guys this kind of information. So we're gonna really dive into these stories like I mentioned. So the first thing I'm gonna kind of talk about is just the unique aspects to Durango and just buying a home specifically here versus other areas. So myself, my business partner, and our team, we have been licensed in the past in 11 different states. And I started out in New Mexico, then came up here and worked up and started our team up here about 4.5 years ago. And so we've really seen the big differences. One of the big differences is going to be insurance. We're going to dive into that a little bit later. It's just tougher to find insurance with the forest fire risk. And that's really the main reason, is that forest fire risk. And so we'll dive into that a little later, but just want to point out a few of the differences first and then dive into some of those. So the other aspect is just going to be the elevation changes. Now, if you've seen my other videos or you're just aware of mountain towns, you know this, but the elevation changes quite a bit. So I'm going to give you the brief understanding. South of town, probably some of the lowest elevation in the area. Then as you get into town, you're 65-12 elevation. As you go north of town, it's really just about the same, climbs about 200 feet. And then as it gets about 20 minutes outside of that north area, the Animas Valley, it starts climbing in elevation pretty quickly. Then as you go east as well as west, let's call it about 10 minutes or so, both directions, starts climbing in elevation pretty quickly as well. And it really does start climbing immediately, but let's talk about those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods, the bigger ones, east and west, about 10 minutes, could potentially get about 50 to 100% more snow in the winter. So just quick, brief overview of the snow. Want to make you aware of that. The other big difference here is driveways. We've got a lot of plenty of steep driveways, longer driveways as well. To be cognizant of that, when you're looking, a lot of those photos will not show you those steeper driveways. I know I hit on this in a lot of other videos, so I'm going to kind of briefly go over this, but just just know that look for those photos, look for those satellite imagery of those steeper driveways. Guys, if you're thinking about moving here and are just having trouble with that or anything else, want to make sure you guys are aware I'm a licensed realtor here in Southwest Colorado, Durango, Mancos, Pagosa, this entire area. Would love to help you with any of your real estate needs. So just reach out, give me a text, call, email, days, nights, weekends. Love to help you with all of your real estate needs. So let's dive back into the video and just continue to talk about just some more of the differences. I would say the other big one is just the size of town. So we're at about 20,000 people in town, Durango, a little bit over 50,000 people in the entire county. Could be slightly off on that. I know it's changed recently, or I should say the numbers have come out recently, but we're right around there. Whereas Bayfield, Pagosa, all these towns around it are way, way, way smaller. So we're talking 2,000-3,000 people population in some of these towns around Durango. So you have very, very few amenities in those other towns compared to Durango. So again, just kind of a brief overview of what you're looking at here. And proximity to other areas is actually really good. You know, you've got 3.5 hours to Albuquerque. You're around 6 hours to Denver. Again, these are just kind of rough numbers. Could be off by 5 minutes or so, but you're fairly close in proximity, and you do have direct flights to Phoenix as well as Denver, and then a direct flight to, I believe it's Dallas in the summer. We've also got Cortez Airport that's about an hour away from us. Now let's kind of dive into the actual examples. So I talked about snowfall. I think that's something I really want you guys to consider as you're weighing out your options. That's something that when I hop on a call with clients, that's the first thing I want to make sure they're aware of, because they usually eliminate certain areas because of the snowfall, or they put them on the list and they say they don't care. But it's just something you want to make sure you're aware of. So the next thing I want to kind of discuss is those I just want to discuss those driveways just a little bit more, and just say those steeper, longer driveways, you want to be cognizant of the amount of plowing you're going to need to do. So I want to give you an actual example of a property that we are under contract on now that is north of Durango. It's in that kind of Purgatory ski resort, the resort mountain area. So it's about 30-ish minutes north of town. And we were getting kind of some estimates, some idea of what it would cost to plow the driveway. It's a longer driveway. It's not very steep, but a longer driveway. You're looking at about $1,000 to $1,500 per winter. We have some friends that live up there. Got an idea from him. He told me he pays around $1,000 a winter. Of course, it depends upon how long the driveway is, where the home is as well. As you get closer to Purgatory, you're getting more snow. As you get further south, you're getting less. And it just depends on the winter as well. Then let's look at insurance. Let's kind of dive into that whole insurance thing. Now, this is a topic all on its own. We could do an hour-long video on this. And a reason I haven't done a video on this in the past is it is a very nuanced subject, because you look at 20 different companies. Some will say yes on the same home as another will say no on regarding giving you insurance. Now, a few factors into that. This is, again, not all insurance companies will have this standard that I'm about to say, but some of them will say there can't be any trees or tree limbs within 5 feet of the roof line. So that doesn't mean you can't make an offer on it and then talk to the seller about cutting those back before closing. That's one thing. And then there's a specific distance from the home to the fire department, and there's a way that we can calculate the amount of time it takes for the fire truck to get up to the property. So reach out if you're curious about that exact math and how you can kind of do that on your own. But there's a distance that the fire department needs to be, or a time the fire department needs to be able to get to the property. And that also can affect insurance very, very greatly. Now, some other things about insurance is just going to be water. So the fire department needs to bring up the road or to your property a certain amount of gallons on the fire truck based on the square footage of the home. So one thing you can do to get around this, now again, this does get a little bit pricier, not insane, but an idea we've come up with in the past, if you were having trouble figuring this out and figuring out insurance for the property, is actually putting like a cistern on the property just for the fire department, keeping that filled with water, letting the insurance company know that you have that. Now again, don't quote me on this. All insurance companies are going to be different. Some might not care that you're doing that, say, no, we're still not giving you insurance. And some might be open to this because of this issue with access to the fire department. Now, you really want to factor that in first, but you also want to talk, now a lot of times clients are talking to or asking the sellers who they use for insurance. A lot of the times they're just saying, no, we're not going to continue to cover the property. We're just continuing that owner. Also keep in mind, a lot of these insurance companies want you to bundle everything. Like they're willing to take the risk on that house. If you have your car, say you have another property, your other property, they want to bundle everything as well. There's a few other things to that, and I've got a great list of insurance agents that I can recommend. So again, just shoot me a text, give me a call, let me know if you would like me to get you the list of insurance agents that can talk to you in a lot more detail. And another thing I want to mention is there are some insurance companies, quite a few, where we can just ask them, hey, does this specific property not qualify because of the fire risk? So what I mean by that is they can check if it's disqualified for that one reason without you going through the full application process. So I know that's just kind of a brief overview, but I want to really make you aware that, well, the other thing I really want to make you aware of is I highly recommend you look into insurance before even going under contract. Now, if it's a town in town Durango, I wouldn't be quite as worried, but almost anywhere besides in town Durango, anywhere where you see a lot of trees around it, it's fairly forested, bigger acreage, highly recommend you just look into insurance before even making the offer on it. Because going back to how I said, I'm going to share some stories with you, got several clients that I've been working with lately where we've looked at the property several times and then we're a little bit more worried about insurance once we start digging into it after looking at the property. So I want to hopefully save you guys that time as well. And hopefully that helps. Again, reach out if you have specific questions on insurance. I've got a lot of great resources for you and can go into a lot more depth on that. All right, now I want to talk a little bit more about home options and what you have to work with here as you look at homes. So I had a client talk to me recently, well today, as well as just recently, about wanting a more modern home. And I was just telling them, honestly, you're not going to see as many modern homes in this market, even if you're in those higher price points, those 3 to 5 million price points. They are out there. Glacier is one place to look, a little bit more modern. I should say mountain modern, I would call it. Glacier is north of town, north of the Animas Valley. Really, really pretty area. It's on a private golf course, and then there are some other properties throughout, but I just want to emphasize that you just don't have as many options as bigger cities, which I know is kind of obvious, but want to make you aware that what I find even in those higher price points, I'm kind of telling clients, like, you can usually have 9 out of 10 of the things you want, but not all of them, even if you're at, again, 3 to 5 million, 1 to 5 million type of price points. And it just gets easier if you're a little bit flexible to, hey, I can renovate this piece, I can do this here. And part of why I say that and where that comes from is a lot of homes are custom homes. And so you're not seeing a lot of tract homes where the builder really had a lot of their own input. You're seeing a lot of homes where clients were, or sellers or buyers were thinking of just, hey, I'm going to live here forever. And so they kind of customize it to what they want. So you'll see a lot of that little, maybe almost funkier floor plans, different floor plans that you're maybe not expecting and haven't seen in the past. Then I kind of want to discuss HOAs. So I want to give you guys a few kind of lessons that I've had and that my clients have had as well. We've seen a few properties where they went from, one recently actually went from a $5,000 per year HOA up to a $9,000 per year HOA that took effect right after my client closed on the property, because they did a special assessment, and instead of doing a special assessment and just charging everyone 40 grand up front, they spread it out in the HOA dues. So this is something I've seen fairly common. I've seen this actually relatively recently on another property or another subdivision. So you really want to be aware of that. Make sure to ask me or whoever you're working with what any recent minutes in the HOA, so you can actually look at what's going on, look at if there have been any discussions towards special assessments. Really be aware of special assessments and just those things going on in those HOA meetings, so you know what's coming, you know what's going on. You can kind of look at their budget, you can see if there are any issues, and you can just look at the roads, you can look at things around you. Hey, is this degrading? Are there any issues here? And we can just get an understanding from the owner as well. Are there any issues with the HOA? Any things you don't like? So I want to put that into context first, and then also kind of just discuss some of the limitations with HOAs that I've seen particularly here. Now, you're probably aware of limitations with HOAs in other areas, but what I've seen here, one of those is going to be the ability to build other dwellings. So being able to do a guest house has been one thing I've had some trouble with. A lot of HOAs do let you do a guest house, but let's say there's already several structures, or just having the space for it. There's been limitations to, you've got to put down a foundation if you want a shed, so it costs you more money, even if it's just a little shed. there's been just some limitations, and I should say the look of things. They want it to really look very, not just nice, but put a lot more work into making maybe a barn not look like a barn and look much more like the home itself. So you're just having some of those limitations in these HOAs. Some other limitations I've seen are just the ability to have chickens, livestock. If you're at all considering that, make sure to let me know when we're looking and I'll double check on those items. The ability to do Airbnb. You're gonna have the limitation there on quite a few HOAs. And what I've seen, just to give you the quick snapshot on short-term rentals, in-town Durango has a very long waiting list to do short-term rentals at all, even if it's not an HOA. And then when you get outside of in-town Durango, you're not limited because you're in the county, but you are limited by the HOA. So you really want to be careful with those HOAs regarding the ability to do short-term rentals, especially if you're factoring that into your budget, how much you're going to be paying per month, if you think you can offset that budget. So want to put those HOAs into perspective, make sure you get those docs, make sure you review those, even before you get too excited about the home, because I've seen a lot of clients say, oh, never mind, that HOA is limiting me from doing XYZ. I don't want to deal with that. Again, I wouldn't say we have a lot of HOAs here that are just too limiting, but there are a lot here in general. And part of the reason for that is just the roads, is just having a way to get those roads plowed and maintained in the summer and spring as well. And there are a lot of dirt roads as well. So it's not just that we have paved roads, it's that we've got these dirt roads that need to be well maintained. Now, the next item that I want to discuss is road noise. Now, I just had a client come out here recently and we drove around to a lot of different neighborhoods and we just stopped the car and listened to the road noise because we've got a lot of neighborhoods that are right off of the highway, whether it be Highway 550 that's going north and south or Highway 160 that's going east and west. So it's something you really want to be careful of. Look at the GPS or look at the property on the map and look, is it close to either one of those highways? If it's not, you're most likely not going to have very much noise. The other road you're going to want to look out for is Florida Road, which turns into County Road 240. That road is relatively busy as well. It's taking you up to Vallecito, Lemon Reservoir, and Bayfield, kind of looping around the top part of kind of the northeast part of Durango. And so those are the main roads you want to look at. I'm going to kind of go over a few neighborhoods. Now there's a ton of different neighborhoods, but I'll kind of go over some of the bigger ones that are going to be fairly close. I'm going to say if you're concerned about noise, you're going to want to be aware of these neighborhoods and just be cautious with where the home is. So one is going to be Durango West, 1 and 2. That's west of town. Then the next one's gonna be Twin Buttes. You're also gonna have Lake Durango. Lake Durango isn't nearly as close to the road, but some of those homes right as you drive in are. There's a lot more neighborhoods up there again, but I'm just hitting on some of the bigger ones. You're gonna have Durango Ridge Ranch. Again, you're not gonna hear much noise from these as these are all 35-acre lots, but there is gonna be a little bit depending on where the home is at. Now let's go east of downtown Durango. Now you're gonna have Three Springs. Now what I love about Three Springs is you really don't hear much of that road noise at all because it's backed up off the highway. So I actually wanna point that out as one you're probably not going to be as concerned with. You've got subdivisions like Valle Escondido and just a lot of those other little subdivisions that are south of Highway 160 as you're going east towards Bayfield. So there's all these little subdivisions right off of the road there. And then there's subdivisions off of Highway 172. Like Florida Meadows. Now again, that one's kind of that 4 out of 10, 3 to 5 out of 10 as far as the noise goes, but it's still something you might want to keep on the list. And just really knowing the areas. You don't need to necessarily write down all these neighborhoods, but just kind of know these areas. Then you've got going north of downtown Durango, the Animas Valley. Now I really want to talk about, kind of emphasize this one, if you will. Really any home in this area is going to hear a little bit of noise. It's going to be a 2 out of 10 or more on kind of that noise scale. As you're over on County Road 250, you're going to have less. As you're closer to Highway 550, you're going to have more. And on County Road 203, you're going to have more. I'm going to say you're going to be that 5 out of 10 or more in that vicinity, but it really, really varies. There's neighborhoods where you don't hear nearly as much because you're backed up off of County Road 203. And then there's neighborhoods like the Ranch over off of 550, Highway 550, where they dip down. And so the elevation kind of goes down below the road, where a lot of those homes don't hear the noise quite as bad, and a few of those homes do. So that's something else that when buying in Durango, I really want my clients to really consider, especially as you're just trying to understand the area. You might see an amazing home and then it's really close to the highway and you're just like, forget it, especially if noise is a really big concern for you. If it's not, it doesn't mean you want to cross all these areas off your list. The Animas Valley is a very, very coveted area. I personally live in the Animas Valley and love it, but there is that little bit of road noise almost no matter where you live. All right, now let's talk a little bit about septic systems. Now, you might not be caring about this at all, so I'll kind of breeze over this, but I'll still make sure to hit on the important parts of this. So I find that buyers are pretty shocked by the price of putting a brand new septic system in, so I want to make sure you're aware. I'd say on average, you're kind of between that $40,000, $45,000 range for a brand new septic. Now, of course, it very much ranges. I've sat down, talked with Mountain Septic several times about this, and it very much ranges based on the property, based on where they're putting it, how they're digging, just so many different details. But that was just kind of an average number he threw out to me based on the year, this last year. And so I want to kind of emphasize, first of all, just make sure you're aware of that number, and then make sure you guys know that in La Plata County, the seller is required to get it inspected and permitted before selling, which is really nice because a lot of other areas we've worked and probably a lot of markets that you guys are in that you're watching from, it's just negotiable. So you might have to take care of that, pay for that, and those inspections could cost around $1,000. So it's a really nice little savings. But if you're putting in a brand new septic in the future for many different reasons, or you're buying land and putting in septic, it's really good for you to be aware. Kind of moving on to wells. I want to make sure you guys are aware of a few different ways that we see wells. First of all, we see people not having wells and having a cistern in place, which is basically a big plastic tank. Recently sold a property, or a few years ago for this property, but recently sold some other properties with cisterns. The previous one I was referring to had 2 cisterns because it was on kind of the side of a cliff. So the company would come, fill up the cistern on the bottom, then it would pump up to the house. And so there are several ways you can do it. You could have a company come and fill up the cistern for you, or you can fill it up yourself, and water is pretty darn affordable. I want to say around, well, don't quote me on this. There are a few different companies, a few different prices, but very affordable. It's more just, do you want to have a property with a cistern that needs hauled water? So that's another piece of criteria. Most people are just going to say no, but hey, if you're open to you want 40, 50 acres in a certain part of town, certain part of the county, a lot of these properties are on cisterns. So you just want to be careful with that, be aware of that. There are ways that we can look into, hey, can this property most likely have a well put in? We've got some great companies. I'm friends with the owner of one of the companies in town and be happy to recommend them to you, where they can kind of do a research, do a study on the property to see if most likely you can drill a well. They'll look at properties around them. They'll look at a lot of different features of the property, kind of make that determination for you if you're looking at a property that doesn't have a well and the seller doesn't know if it could be drilled. Those wells, I have seen them go as much as 80, 90,000. A more average number I've seen would be closer to 30 to 50,000. Again, I know it's a big range, but just really depends on the water table, how deep they're gonna have to drill, and they do drill by the foot or bill you by the foot. So it really ranges. I just wanna also expound on inspections. So I always recommend having a well inspection. There's some around $1,000 out in our county. So I just want to touch on that. All right, the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is I've had a good handful of clients that really want to be on river frontage property or waterfront in general, lake, river, creek, some sort of water. And what I want to discuss is I've set up portals for them in the past where they ask me, hey, can you go into the MLS and send us everything that's riverfront? Now, what's really tricky about that, just to be honest with you and kind of show you what's going on and what I've seen in our market, a lot of agents will put riverfront in the MLS or waterfront in some way in the MLS when it's not. A good example is Edgemont. I've seen a few agents put waterfront when there is a river about a quarter-mile walk away from all of this, from this entire subdivision. And so yes, it has access to a river, but it is not waterfront. There's been quite a few other properties where they are within walking distance to the Animas River, but they are by no means is their lot on water. So be aware of that, and also be aware that when you're looking on Realtor or Zillow.com and you put in riverfront, again, what I can do for you is when you reach out to me, you let me know that. I can point out some great subdivisions. I can just do a search, and knowing the area, I can just tell you the areas that you're going to want to look for, which I just did for a client the other day. We just made an offer on a property that is in a really cool subdivision, gated subdivision that has river access and has a really nice nature preserve that backs up to this river. So if that's something that you guys want, let me know. There's a lot of neighborhoods that you really can't find that information out there on places like Zillow and Realtor.com. You really have to know where that river frontage or river access is to these properties. Now with that, there's some other nuances to MLS searches and just being able to search things online. Some other good things I can search in the MLS are things like water rights. So if you really want a property with water rights, you also want a property that maybe backs up to national forest. I've had clients say, hey, I want it back. I either want some acreage or maybe a little less acreage and it back up to national forest. That's something I'm really able to search for you and just tell you and point out on a map. When we hop on Zoom or hop on a call, I can point that out on a map. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a licensed realtor here in Southwest Colorado, and something I love to do for my clients as well is get my drone up in the air, as well as a video walkthrough of any properties that you guys are looking for. So I've been doing that almost daily for the past couple of weeks for a good handful of my clients. They've been really enjoying how I'm doing that. I'm doing that with the camera you see here. So as you can see, moving around, really nice gimbal, shows these properties really nicely. So I'd love to do that for you. Again, just reach out, happy to do that. And then I want to talk about leasebacks. So if you're not familiar with what a leaseback is, it's where you make an offer on a home. Let's say you want to close on February 1st, for example. And then the seller wants to lease back the home from you, say from February 1st to March 1st. For several different reasons, we see sellers wanting to do this, but I just want to make you aware of kind of the pros and cons and how this works. You're going to see it I don't want to say relatively often, but I've seen it quite a bit in the last year or so. And obviously it just always depends on the seller's situation and just what they're going through, what kind of move they're doing, but be aware that it will help you a lot in the offer if you're just able to work with them on that. And there's some really creative ways we can do that. Let's say that you're allowing them to rent there for free. Maybe you can work that into the offer or change the offer so that it kind of works for you, so you have the money for an Airbnb or for a vacation rental. A place I recommend looking is Furnished Finder, and that's a website that has furnished rentals that are typically longer stays, typically around 90-day stays. So check that website out, and that way you're kind of prepared, and I just want you to be prepared for the potential of the seller asking for this lease back. And now the risk to this is it is like you are a landlord. So you are like a landlord for this seller now who sold their home and now they're renting the home from you for a little bit of time. So you want to kind of weigh those options out. Doesn't mean you should just say no right off the bat, but just being aware of that. And that is a reason that we had a client not be able to go under contract recently, because the seller was really set on that. So that's something that I can go ahead and ask the sellers in the future. Hey, do you guys need this? What's your situation? And this is something we typically do, but sometimes we get surprised and they say that they want to do a lease back, even when we've kind of asked what their situation is and what we can work out. And just kind of looking back down at my notes, I want to give you guys kind of another case study of where just getting movers out, getting help with moving, looking into moving costs. So I really want to recommend looking into moving costs. Can be really, really costly depending on where you're moving from. Again, these are some of kind of the basics. You already know some of this most likely. The other thing is just cleaning, making sure that the seller cleans it, or just letting me know your expectations. How clean you want the house? Do you want it professionally cleaned? Is that a deal breaker for you? Sometimes sellers are like not excited to have a professional cleaner do it. Maybe they already plan on cleaning it. They're just really clean people. You just kind of want to weigh out how important that is to you in general, but that's something we can always put in the offer as well. And so this, of course, does not cover every single scenario that I've seen, but it covers a good handful, from issues with insurance, issues with leaseback, issues with inspections. With those items on inspections, keep in mind sometimes the seller has done an inspection in the past. So I do recommend taking a good close look at that and factoring that into your offer. And then the other thing I'm going to mention is the roof, factoring in roofs. So if the roof is really old, make sure the insurance company is aware, or make sure you're aware of how that might affect getting insurance on the property because of the age of the roof. That's something that we were kind of tackling recently, even with a property that's close to the $3 million price point. So again, just want to make sure you guys are aware of some of these nuances, these things that when you're looking at homes, you're really excited about the home, you're aware of in the back of your mind, hey, can it get insurance? Is there going to be issue with getting water up here? Septic, does it already have those? And just looking at some of those bigger ticket items, how expensive is the roof going to be if it's really old already? Do I kind of factor that into my offer? And then being aware that sometimes these sellers will calculate for that roof. So maybe they know the roof is old, they just dropped the price, they kind of factor that in. It's always a tricky one to kind of analyze, because sometimes they're just telling you that and sometimes it's true. So you kind of weigh those out as you're looking at the comps, the comparable sales, and just weighing those things in. Lastly, I just want to talk about running comparable sales on properties so that you know what they're worth. Now, I'm in the process of doing that right now for a client of mine, and the trick is there's plenty of homes out here that are very unique in the sense of one of these properties we're looking at now is the biggest home in this neighborhood by quite a bit, and it's going to be one of the highest, it's going to be the highest sale in that neighborhood, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, you generally want to be kind of the smaller home in the area, but if you're not, it's more just that it's trickier to run comps on this property. And so being aware that that can be a challenge, especially with these bigger custom homes, bigger acreage, you're comparing these nicer features in the home, you're comparing things like the views that are kind of those intangibles that are tougher to run comps on, like a nice view versus a really nice view. Just sometimes that's very tough to analyze. So I just want to make you guys aware of that fact as well. That's one of the conversations I was having with a client just recently. Again, just going back to the beginning of the video, how my real goal was just show you some of those clients, bring you into my world of a lot of those conversations I've been having with clients so you can kind of be prepared as you go into getting ready to buy. Again, guys, let me know if you're even thinking about moving to Durango, Southwest Colorado, Pagosa, Bayfield, Mancos, Cortez, this entire area. Let me know. Love to help you out with all of your real estate needs. You call, text, email, days, nights, weekends. We've got your back when it comes to moving here to Southwest Colorado. Then also, guys, I'd love it if you left a comment. Let me know what you thought, if you had any questions or any additional videos that you'd like me to make in the future. And please share this video. I think this video could be really helpful to a lot of people looking to buy in this area. Please share this, like, and subscribe. I'll see you later.